Gunfire rang throughout the valley. Both sounds of plasma and kinetic shots could be heard. As the halo turned in orbit, a sun-kissed sky presented itself, turning into more of a deep red than a usual earthy orange. "Chief, are you seeing this?" An erratic voice asked over comms. Echo 216 coughed as he spoke. A plume of smoke had covered the distant battlefield. It was almost impossible to see through from the chief's position. "There's something big here, bigger than that Scarab." A nuclear blast of blinding red plasma spews out from the centre eye of the walking tank. Drips of superheated plasma fall from the cannon, scorching the earth below it. Steam and fog begin to surround and consume the spire, making it almost impossible to see from the hilltop. A group of Marines jog in from behind. They stand at the ready behind the Master Chief. What the hell's going on over there? The dust cloud unveils a being of magnificent size. It stands tall, staring at the Scarab. The machine was only a fraction of its height. The Scarab's beam seems to have done little damage, only burning the skin of the unbelievably huge creature standing at the gateway's activation site. The size difference between the two was like comparing a dog and its master. The remaining UNSC forces atop of the hill watched as the creature picked the Scarab up and held it in its arms like a rifle. Its charging beam once more sent a massive blast of hot plasma, only for it to be pointed down at its own banished forces, decimating fields of brutes and elites. This gigantic demon walked on two legs and had a goat-shaped skull for a head. Coughing is heard throughout the comms, and once again Echo 216 speaks. "Chief, I'm inside the spire. The entire ground's shaking. What should we do?" The Master Chief assesses the situation from the hilltop, trying to decide the best course of action. He grips his assault rifle's handle tighter, double-checking his ammunition. The rifle's display only reads 12, and looking at the info displayed on his hood indicated that his sidekick pistol also had very little ammunition left. Being this light for such a situation was far from ideal. One of the Marines behind him huffs out a pained statement. "Damn, we lost Davis." Chief turns to see the Marine crouched over his fallen comrade. His hood displayed the information of the lifeless body. Her name was Private Luna Davis, aged 22. Her vitals were completely flatlined. Looking at her body through thermals suggested that she had only died around 10 minutes ago. The Master Chief felt mortified. Her age seemed to bounce around in his head, even when the display in his hood had dispersed the information. He blamed himself, believing that if he was faster, he could have saved her. The Marine beside her closed her now lifeless eyes with a gentle motion and grabbed her dog tags. He then began scavenging the medical equipment from her battle harness, as well as picking up her bulldog shotgun. The other 5 Marines around him had been stood silently, with their heads slightly bowed. Another massive explosion rings out over the valley from the spire's direction, shaking everybody from their gloomy situation. The soldiers took their weapons back up into their chest, tensing for battle. "Master Chief?" John looks down to the Marine carrying the deceased soldier's shotgun. "Your ammo counter's low. Do you need a weapon?" The Marine's outstretched arm holds the gun up to Chief. Without a word, John calmly places his MA-37 assault rifle down, leaning it against a rock, and picks up the bulldog. His hood immediately configurates a reticle true to the spread of the weapon. The information clearly shows a full drum of shells. One of the other Marines passes him the reserve ammunition for the shotgun.
"Hold position. Release the signal flare. Comms to Infinite Base should be back online. You'll have transport within the hour."
The now stunned Marine seems almost insulted by Chief's sentence, but after another large explosion from the distance, it became apparent that a squad of Marines would just be cannon fodder in comparison to a Spartan. He complied, reluctantly, and the Master Chief began a swift sprint towards the spire, covering stretches of ground 3 times faster than what the squad would have been able to manage. As they watch, the spire in the distance shoots out a blue pulse into the sky, contrasting greatly against the bloody red atmosphere. Chief, that thing out there is huge. I don't even think a Guardian would be able to take it on. John runs further towards the conflict. A massive being the size of an ancient skyscraper stands in front of the spire, blasting fire down with its now makeshift Scarab cannon.
Hold position, stay out of sight.
The comm's hazy signal replies. Right, roger that. The Master Chief finds himself at the bottom of one of the 2 ramps built into the side of the spire. Once again, the obsidian-like material of the structure seems to grab his attention, just like in the cave. Clearly this wasn't made of Forerunner alloys. At the top, he finds the large Spartan-like Marine. He stands patiently, looking at the icon of sin, remembering just how much of an annoyance it was dealing with one before. The being fires the red beam of its claimed Scarab to the little remaining banished on the grasslands below the spire. Chief walks over to the Doomslayer, simply standing by his side, bulldog in hand.
We trade one enemy for another.
The Doomslayer looks at the Spartan curiously. John nods his head. The Slayer does the same. The icon of sin finally twists around, facing its 2 final foes that sit atop the spire's platform, both calm but primed for combat. The Slayer holds a different weapon in his hands, one with a green light along the side that looked similar in design as a banished dreadnought, just not red or a few thousand meters long. The colossal being in front of them lets out an ear-shattering scream. It turns its makeshift plasma cannon towards the duo. Before it could charge up, a powerful boom is projected throughout the Doomslayer's strange weapon. The projectile produced from the barrel looked to be some kind of green energy shaped into a sphere. It slammed through the Scarab, blasting a clean hole through its midsection and hitting the icon of sin. Whatever the weapon was had far more damage potential than a glassing beam, and was compact as a Spanker rocket launcher. The freakishly tall demon let out a second scream, this time of pure agony, and dropping what remained of the destroyed Scarab. Its hand and chest had been devastated, leaving chunks of exposed, burnt and bony flesh. Before the Doomslayer could let out a second blast, its undamaged arm swung atop the spire, knocking both Chief and the Doomslayer to the rocky field below. John's shields flashed as he hits the ground hard. The Doomslayer does his best to land on his feet, but falls to one knee. The Slayer looks up at the battlefield they'd been thrown onto. Bodies of strange, alien creatures, only best described as gorillas and alligators, are scattered across the muddy ground. Some even seemed to look like birds in the shape of humanoids. He turned back to the icon of sin. Its hulking stature looked even further down upon them now. It raised one of its building-sized legs, as if ready to squash the Slayer like an ant. He rapidly looks around for the BFG, only for it to be nowhere in sight. Before he can dive out of the way, the Master Chief activates his thrusters into the Slayer's direction, whilst grappling a fallen gravity hammer towards him. As the foot lowers only feet away from them, Spartan 117 swings the large hammer up into the foot, causing it to stumble back. The Doomslayer reaches onto his back for the sling shotgun and begins peppering the foot, leaving deep gouges in its thick hide. It falls back onto one knee, but attempts to recover, only taking a moment to use the tip of the spire to try pull itself back onto 2 feet. Master Chief gives it no time to recover, however, and begins a relentless tactic, grappling towards its hand atop the tower. He zips through the air and lands at the top. The demon grasps the top of the structure the way an old person would use a banister to climb stairs. The Master Chief swings the hammer down onto its tank-sized hand, releasing another powerful flow of gravity, pinning the hand on the spire. It was like getting your hand trapped in a door. The fingers warped and mangled, becoming misshapen. The gravity hammer's lights at the end of the weapon diminished, revealing its battery power had completely drained. Without a second thought, the Master Chief equipped his bulldog, spraying buckshot into the open and mutilated fingers. Out of nowhere, a second claw clutches the Master Chief, squeezing him within its grasps. His shotgun falls to the ground below. The creature raises the Spartan up to its face, trying to create some form of eye contact between the two. Before any more harm could come of John, the familiar swooshing sound of a Spanker rocket launcher was heard from below, and an explosion plants itself into the Icon of Sin's face. It flinches, covering its goat-shaped head and dropping Master Chief to the ground. He falls rapidly, landing with a thud. This time on both feet. He recovers quickly, looking to see who fired the shot. The Doomslayer stands a few meters away, with a Spanker atop his shoulder, smoke seeping out of the double barrels. A thunderous whooshing sound can be heard as debris and scrap of the destroyed Scarab is launched towards the Doomslayer by the Icon of Sin. Another rocket is fired, blasting into the hunk of alloy. The last rocket had been used. The Slayer inspects the weapon and drops it to the floor. Plumes of dust from the landing debris begin to slowly reveal the now new and far more horrific face of the Icon of Sin. Scorched flesh, fractured skull bone, and an impact crater in the centre of its forehead, revealing an exposed brain.
How is it still alive?
Chief looks back at the Doomslayer. He shows no sign of concern or fear, only a contempt rage building up. He reveals a large hilt in his hand, and a large red blade snaps into existence. Electricity pops around the blade aggressively. Chief recovers the shotgun from the ground and replaces the drum. The fight is about to get a whole lot more dangerous. An explosive projectile is shot out from some kind of extra appendage that reveals itself from the Doomslayer's power armour. He aims for the face, but misses, skinning one of its horns. It sets a light burning. The Icon launches its enormous fist towards the Doomslayer. With ease, he dives out of the way and slashes at its already mangled hand with the sword, wrecking its fingers, leaving it in a bloody stump of scorched meat and pulp. It screams in anger. The Slayer begins a sprint up its arm towards its face for the blowing sword strike, only to be grabbed by its only good hand at the last second. Stuck, he launches another projectile from his armour. It blasts one into its eyes, blinding it partially. The noises it made could be heard from the other side of the halo. It throws the Doomslayer across the field in frustration, but also as an attempt to survive the small but clearly dangerous human. Before it can attempt another foot stomp, the Master Chief had found a way to stop it in its warpath. The strange weapon the Slayer wielded was by his feet. He picked it up and inspected it. The lights began to glow. He gripped the handle and placed his finger gently over the trigger. This was it. He grappled the Icon of Sin, the device penetrating through the meat in its forearm. He took off into the air like a bullet, grasping the BFG. The demon looked at him. As he blasted the Icon through its head, the energy of the BFG blasted clean through the face, leaving a hole the size of a pelican. Chief, still in the air, threaded the needle as he fired. following the projectile through the deceased body and landing roughly next to the Doomslayer, rolling into a large rock protruding out of the ground. The BFG sliding along the floor with him. His armour emits the energy shielding charging sound. He hadn't noticed how close to the projectile he was as he flinged himself through the hole. The Doomslayer appeared through his visor, looking over him. He held his hand out. The Master Chief took it, not expecting him to actually be able to pull his weight, especially since he was in his Mjolnir. But to his surprise, the Slayer showed no sign of struggle, pulling him up graciously. Chief looked to the ground at the BFG. He picked it up and handed it back over. The Slayer took it and nodded his head with respect. The large corpse thumped to the floor and the fractured plates of Zeta Halo shook violently, similar to how an earthquake and its tectonic plates would move. It only lasted a few seconds, however. Chief, is it dead? Did we actually win?
Affirmative.
As soon as the words left his mouth, the door at the spire opened, and a man in a blue jumpsuit began a steady jog towards the two, jumping and weaving through the field of corpses. As he regroups with the duo, he turns to look at the building-sized corpse that lay dangling over the edges of the fracture plates. What did you do to that thing? The Slayer holds his BFG up, hanging it over his shoulder, pointed up into the sky. I see. The private comm channel to a redesignated Infinity base flashes on Chief's HUD, and a voice begins to transmit into his audio systems. This is Lasky to Sierra 117. Sitrep. John replies with haste.
Sir, all enemy forces have been eliminated. We're moving to the source. It's located in a cave a few clicks out.
Lasky replies back in a positive tone. Roger that, Chief. Mark a waypoint. We'll rendezvous with you there. A pelican announces its arrival from the sky, landing directly in front of the three that now sit around a campfire just outside the cave. The sky had since turned into a milky, dark purple. A man in a clearly torn and damaged officer uniform with what looks to be makeshift marine armour equipped across his left shoulder and chest with addition of knee and shin pads exits the pelican. Chief, good to see you again. What happened? Long-range comms went down once reports of a portal opened in the sky? Chief stood up and saluted as Lasky approached.
Sir, a new enemy unfamiliar to the Banished made its way to the Halo.
Lasky replies in confusion and begins trying to connect the dots. At ease, Chief. Couldn't be the Endless that you were talking about earlier, could it? Echo 219 replies for him. We don't think so, but it has something to do with him. He points towards the soldier still sat around the campfire, his helmet's visor lit up, showing his face through the glass. The Slayer stands up, without acknowledging Lasky and the Marines. He starts walking towards the cave. I guess he's leading the way? They all follow behind, Chief and the Slayer with their weapons at ease, Lasky and the pilot close on their six, with the Marines armed behind them. They enter a large area of the cave. The ceiling was far above them, and the Forerunner design around the room had been soaked in dried blood. The Doomslayer turns back to the small expedition he'd led inside. Chief stands, shotgun in hand. The Marines sweep the room and Lasky falls in.
This is the place.
Captain Lasky looks around the room with his sidekick resting gently in his hand. A scream cries out and a body is launched through the portal. An elite covered in its own blood slams to the floor, its armour torn to shreds. Everyone in the room swings their weapons at the new target, apart from the Slayer, who turns around casually. The Master Chief walks over towards the Sangheili warrior. It struggles to breathe as it lets out a sentence.
Atriox has won.
Chief stands back up, looking at the now pulsating portal. The Slayer stares at him. He can't be. We all thought he was dead. Lasky replies to the pilot's shock. Apparently not.
Sir, permission to leave this ring.
He stares at the Doomslayer as he asks plainly. For what purpose, Chief? The Slayer turns his head, watching John in curiosity.
Sir, to kill Atriox and finish this fight.
Granted. Hey everyone, thank you for watching this series of What If. This took a lot of time to write and record, so I hope you can all appreciate it. Big shout out to my friend Sergeant Gaming 115 who helped me with the writing in this story. You can find his channel in the description linked below. And another shout out to Dashy Jinx for creating the thumbnail. You can find his Twitter also linked below as well. Patreon shout out to my one and only Virinif. Virinif, I think. I apologise if I butchered that. But your support is massively appreciated. I've got some more what ifs coming soon as well. I also have a collaboration or two in the close future, so make sure to stick around. There's also going to be a 10,000 subscribers special, so keep an eye out for that soon too. Anyway, I'm gonna go. I've got to edit this thing. So yeah, make sure to subscribe for more and comment what you thought about the series. Peace.